Good afternoon and welcome everyone to what is the third of a series of regional webinars, with today's focusing on the need for small-scale affordable rural homes in North and East Hertfordshire. And the key here is small scale, and you'll hear more about that later. We hope the presentations we have from a landowner, a parish councillor, North Hertfordshire District Council, a rural housing enabler and one of our own residents will inspire you to find out more about what we do to help communities thrive. We'd encourage you to submit questions throughout the session, and you can do that by clicking on the icon at the top of the screen which has a question mark in a speech bubble, and we'll try to get through as many as we can at the end of the session. And without further ado, I'll now hand you over to the Chair of English Rural, Pam Reynolds, who'd like to say a few words. Over to you, Pam.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Reynolds, and I have the immense privilege of being the chair of the English Rural Housing Association. This is a voluntary role, and I give up my time gladly, as the issue of lack of rural housing, which is affordable, is supremely important and which I feel is often overlooked. First, I should like to thank today's presenters and to all of you who have made the time to come into this event. Every new affordable home has to start somewhere, and the very fact that you have logged in and shown an interest in our work today could lead to something wonderful for a village in the future. I live in and run a small business in the New Forest, which, like North Hertfordshire, is a beautiful and sought after area, with house prices and private rents spiralling out of the control of local people. We need our families locally to be able to live and work close to their roots, so support networks are maintained, and to provide local services to the community, such as carers, gardeners and paramedics. Building houses to rent is not an easy task, and it sometimes takes 10 years or more to get a scheme from inception to completion. At English Rural, we never want to impose housing on an unwilling community. We do our utmost to work with parish councils to provide the homes to fulfil their local housing needs. This does not mean huge housing estates. Our usual developments are around 6 houses, which are always retained by English Rural and which can never be sold off as second homes and therefore lost to the local community. In this presentation, you will hear from a landowner, a parish councillor and one of our residents, which I do hope will give you all food for thought. And without further ado, I will hand over to Allison Thompson, our Deputy Director of Development at English Rural.
Thank you, Pam, and that's a great introduction and saved me quite a few sentences of my preparations. Yes, as Pam has said, it's going to be a mix of videos and live presentations today. And as David said, there will be an opportunity for you to submit questions through the Q&A button with the question mark on the top of your screen. I sometimes get that confused with the chat one, so I thought, just in case anyone else is a bit like me, I would spell it out. I thought it might be helpful first to say a little bit more about English Rural. As Pam has said, we are a specialist housing association and we only develop, own and manage homes in small villages. We were formed in 1992 and currently have 1,230 homes in 150 villages, which crosses 40 local authority areas. Each development, the average size is around 6 to 8 homes, and our work is based on meaningful relationships with parish councils, local authorities, landowners, rural housing enablers, community land trusts, and more recently, neighbourhood plan groups. Each scheme is tailored to meet the housing needs of that particular community, which will have been identified in a housing needs survey. All of our affordable homes are occupied by local people who have a strong, proven connection to the village. None of our affordable homes have ever been lost to the open market. Our tenants don't have a right to buy, and our shared owners can't staircase and to buy 100% of the property outright. So all of our homes remain in that community in perpetuity for future generations, and that's really important to us and the communities in which we have schemes. Firstly, we're going to see a video from a landowner in Kent who recently made a small piece of land available for local needs housing, and it's currently on site and due to complete in a couple of months. I should mention that this video was recorded during very strict COVID guidelines, so it's in the open, in a field, on quite a blustery day. So some of the sound quality is affected a little, but I think you'll get the message.
Yes, I'm Henry Bryant. I've been living here in the village all my life, which is nearly 73 years. My father lived in the village all his life, except when he was away at the war. And my grandparents lived in the village all their married life. So we've got connections with the village that go back at least 100 years, a little bit more. Well, I should think about 30 years ago, I was asked to make this piece of land available for rural housing or for affordable housing. But I must admit I wasn't quite as philanthropic in my younger days. But more recently, the Parish Council did a survey which showed that there was a desperate need for affordable housing in Herne Hill, and none of the other sites that they picked out, none of the landowners were prepared to sell the land, and I was the only one, which is fine by me, having lived in the village all my life. I thought, well, here's a chance to put a little bit back into the community that I've lived in for so long. I would say that most of the problems really related to a lack of communication between the parish council at the time and the parishioners. Obviously, if you're going to sell land at a big discount from what it would make if it was for full planning permission, you're only going to get landowners to agree to that on sites that have no development potential, which immediately means that people think that we're building on the wrong sites, and they can't understand why it wasn't done on a brownfield site or somewhere nearer to other buildings. It was more of a greenfield site, and that did cause problems, has to be said, but we overcame them, and I detect now that it's all signed and sealed, that people have accepted it, and I think once they're built, they'll be surprised how good they look. There was a development quite close to here at a village called Leveland, and there was terrific uproar there about it. And I've had several people from that area say to me, to tell you the truth, it looks better now than it did before. Well, mainly it's affordable housing for people of the parish. And in recent times, all the children of people who've lived in the village all their lives are having to move out of the village, possibly quite far away, when they really would much rather stay near their families. This has a big benefit on both ends of the life story. The grandparents are somewhere near at hand to help with the raising of children, and at the other end, the children are near to the grandparents to help them in their old age. And the thing makes complete sense to me that people don't want to move into the towns. They're country people, they want to stay in the country. And if you look up and down the roads around Herne Hill, I can remember when they were all occupied by people who worked on farms or in fairly rural industries within the parish. Now, of course, they're occupied by people who commute or work in local towns. I think the nub of the problem is that the parish councils have got to decide whether they need affordable housing in their parishes, and then they have got to communicate with the parishioners and tell them what they're planning to do, why they're planning to do it, and how they're planning to do it, before it all becomes sort of semi-official and parishioners are suddenly finding out about it at presentation meetings when they knew nothing about it at all, and all of a sudden the whole thing goes in the wrong direction. And it's all down to communication, as so often is the case in life. I have found English rural straightforward and easy to work with. I genuinely believe that they've done their utmost to bend to the wishes of the local community in their needs and wants. And I'm looking forward to seeing these houses built and seeing local people living in them and enjoying them and remaining part of village life.
Thank you, Henry. I mean, Henry is very typical of our local landowners that we acquire sites from, but we don't, it's not just local landowners. English Rural have acquired sites from parish councils, local authorities, the church commissioners, diocesan land and private estates. So there are a whole range of landowners out there that we can work with. I'd now like to introduce Debbie Elan, the Housing Supply Officer at North Herts Council. And Debbie's going to talk about how the council can support rural communities to provide affordable homes for local people. Thank you, Debbie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Obviously, we're looking, part of my role is really to ensure that there's affordable housing across our district in North Hertfordshire. It's quite a rural district. We have the 4 main towns and then about 34 rural parishes. So quite a rural district, as I said. I think over the past 15 years, over 100 units of affordable housing have been delivered because of the rural partnership with Community Development Action. The schemes have included from very small, a single dwelling house in a village, to on a much larger scale, the re-provision of 24 defective dwellings and 10 new affordable homes, which also included the repair and the refurbishment of the village hall, which was a very important community asset to that particular village. The provision of these affordable homes ensures that many of our rural villages and parishes remain sustainable and viable, and provide valuable support to those services and community services in the parishes that we've delivered affordable housing, including, you know, local shops, pubs, village halls, and primary schools and nurseries as well, with obviously keeping younger people there. As I said, the council have been working in partnership with Community Development Action for what is actually longer than 15 years, but that's how long I've been at North Herts. Obviously, they're an independent voluntary organisation, and working with them and our housing association partners, we formed the rural partnership to aid delivery of affordable housing to meet identified housing needs, as Allison touched on earlier. The Rural Housing Enabler at Community Development Action, Giles, who I know is speaking later, undertakes a rural housing needs survey of the whole parish. So each household receives a survey. And then also, if people have a local connection to the parish but have had to move away for whatever reason, they can also complete a survey. And these surveys are used to identify any affordable housing need in that parish. And then we'll work together with our housing association partners to identify sites, to develop the sites or schemes to meet those needs identified. The council is a non-stock holding authority. We transferred our stock in 2003. So any new homes are owned and managed by our housing association partners. Talking more about the survey, obviously it's a standard survey template that CDA use, as I said, which is sent to all households in the parish and anyone who has a local connection but had to move away. Obviously, the local connection usually includes someone who lives in the parish or lived in the parish, has a permanent employment in the parish, or has an immediate family member, mother, father, brother, adult child, that kind of thing. And as Alison mentioned in her presentation earlier, we have legal agreements in place, also known as Section 106 agreements, to ensure that the homes remain affordable in perpetuity, which I think is important to a lot of our rural communities, that they don't go into home ownership. We have there is no right to buy, and obviously staircasing on any shared ownership properties is restricted to 80% in the majority of our villages and rural parishes. I know there is a couple of particularly large ones where that staircasing usually can't be restricted because of the size of them, but in general the aim is to keep those affordable housing for local people in perpetuity. Again, in our Section 106 agreements, we take a cascade approach, so that initial or first lets to the properties are to applicants with a local connection to that parish, and that also applies to any shared ownership properties. And then if for whatever reason there isn't anyone from the parish in question, then we would go out to neighbouring parishes and they would be named in the legal agreement. It's then opened out to any other rural parish in North Hertfordshire before being opened out to North Hertfordshire generally. Obviously, if we've had a survey and a need identified, then because sometimes there is a bit of a delay between getting the survey and then obviously having the properties coming out of the ground and being able to be let. Sometimes I think there is kind of a mismatch, and that's why we have the cascade in place, because if people with a connection to the parish in question have had to obviously sort out their own housing need and had to move out of the village or parish. But I think I'm going to end there, and obviously I know we've got a question and answer session if anybody wants to know any more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie, and it's great to hear a local authority talk about the importance of affordable housing in villages, creating that rural sustainability. You know, everything in the village relies on people being able to afford to live there, the shop, the school, the pub, everything. So it's great to hear that. And interesting points about the local connection criteria and the Section 106 agreement. I mean, from our experience, we've ever only had to go to neighbouring parishes on a handful of occasions. It's nearly always that direct main parish that gets the local allocation. We've now got a video from the chair of a parish council in Surrey, which talks about their experience in providing local needs homes and also the benefits that it's brought to their community.
Well, we're standing here at the Miller Lane development, and the Parish Council have always recognised that a rural exception site is a good way to deliver affordable housing for local people who would otherwise be priced out of the villages they grew up in. We recognise that small-scale developments of affordable housing restricted to people from the parish can help invigorate the community. And Miller Lane had already been put forward by the owners, a family who'd originally run a market garden in the village adjacent to the site. So it kind of had a local connection already anyway. And so our initial step was to work with Surrey Rural Housing, the Rural Housing Enabler, on a housing needs survey, which established that there'd be sufficient people with a local connection to occupy the 8 dwellings that have been built here. The next step was to choose the housing association, and the choice to work with English Rural Housing was an easy one for us because they'd already successfully delivered 2 other projects in the village. We've always found them very easy to deal with, and they take residents' feedback seriously and genuinely work with the community to deliver the best outcome for the village. And importantly, they bring a local legitimacy to their projects, which is, of course, central to the whole affordable housing process. Okay, as a parish council, we're always trying to keep our residents informed so that they have the facts with which they can make meaningful decisions. And with regard to housing, that may mean sharing information on borough planning policies and targets, which may have an impact on the village. At the moment, this is very much in people's minds as we're currently in the process of engaging with the community as part of producing a neighbourhood plan. The advent of social media means that a lot of misinformation is easily circulated, so it's important that the Parish Council has a recognised set of channels that people can rely on to get their information. So number one, we have an official Parish Council website, which not only shows people meeting agendas and minutes, but also the latest news in relation to neighbourhood planning and other housing issues. We have a village e-news, which is an email system that people subscribe to, and emails are circulated to the village on a regular basis with latest news. And for those that don't have internet access, the postman is employed quite often for leaflet drops and general information to households. And of course, there's the local village shop, which is a source of much local chit-chat and can be good source of information, but a bit like social media can also be a source for misinformation, so we have to be a bit careful there. I think the website and the e-news channels provide the reassurance to residents that they're getting the information they need on subjects like rural exception sites and affordable homes, and they can be assured that in the case of affordable houses, they will be for local people. One of our councillors, in fact, represents the 5th generation of his family to live in Dunsville, and the next 2 continue to live in the village thanks to English rural housing developments. Well, the average house price in Surrey is 14 times the average annual income in this country, and average rural homes are 30% more expensive than homes in urban areas. The result of that is that many rural villages have a real imbalance of social and economic mix. We wanted our community to remain vibrant and prevent the loss of local services and facilities. Therefore, it's important that our local community remains accessible to younger people and working families, and not just the retired and wealthy. Research by the English Rural Housing Association suggests that every £1 spent in local affordable housing developments provides £6.50 in economic and social return to the community. So it's not just about providing housing, it also impacts on people's lives. And a good example here is the Dunsville Village Shop, which is it's been community owned and run since 2011. And it was an English rural shared ownership property that enabled one of our young shop managers, who was really responsible for building the shop up to what it is now, to remain local. And she actually lived in Arnold Close, which is actually directly opposite the shop on the common in Dunsfold. Discounted local sale dwellings also provide an important kind of bridge, really, for those people who are looking for a larger sized property but can't quite afford the 3-4 bedroom houses that are available on the open market in the area. And they obviously also provide a valuable balance to the community.
Thank you, Stephen. Parish councils are our key partners in delivering local needs housing, and particularly their involvement in seeking sites and working with us on the consultation events are incredibly important. There is an excellent parish council guide which was updated last year, which has a wealth of information in it, and we'll be emailing a link to this guide to all the delegates after the seminar. I'm now pleased to introduce Giles Meredith, Rural Housing Enabler and Accredited Community-Led Housing Advisor from CDA Herts, who will give his perspective on the role of a Rural Housing Enabler.
Hello, good afternoon. So as you've heard, I work for Community Development Action Herts, CDA for short, as a Rural Housing Enabler and Community-Led Housing Advisor. I've been here for about 5 years. We're a very small rural issues charity, and we've been around for about 55 years, so we're in fact older than me, would you believe? It's great for me to know that I have a worthwhile job, and I know lots of people don't feel that way. And along with people in similar roles right across the country, we try to help communities to achieve affordable housing, principally through evidencing housing need via the surveys that we carry out. We know that housing is unaffordable for many, and in the Y graphic there at the bottom of the slide, it spells it out. It's because the ratio of income to house prices is about 1 to 12 in North Herts, and in other parts of Hertfordshire it's as high as 1 to 16. And remember that a mortgage is usually only available at a ratio of about 1 to 4. And it's just as bad in rural areas where there may be little or no socially rented housing available as an alternative. So my challenge is in persuading communities that they want to work with us, with me, and to undertake surveys on their behalf. And it is a trust issue. Many communities are fearful of development, and we understand perfectly well why. It's partly because of the developments that they have seen around them, executive homes that are far, far out of reach of normal people. But happily, we can show them what we're trying to achieve is different through shining examples like Farm View in Holwell, which is on the bottom right of the slide. A survey in 2015 ends up in Settle Housing Association, who have been a constant and valued contributor to our partnership in North Herts, delivering in 2021, 6 years later, 8 highly desirable and beautifully finished homes that enhance the community and crucially include 2 bungalows that can meet the demand for local residents who have impaired mobility. And on the left there, you can see Warehorn, an example of a highly attractive English rural development, which you would not imagine was social housing. I also understand that parish councils are inundated with inquiries from developers with or without shark fins, and so are wary of us. They may see themselves as guardians or gatekeepers who implicitly know what villagers want or need. But when we do ask the questions we do in our surveys, do you support a development of affordable housing? Typically the answer comes back yes in a resounding 85% of cases. So I'd encourage parishes or landowners to work with us to help them to understand who in their community is struggling to find affordable housing and appropriate places to live. Our surveys are normally funded by the housing associations who we work with, but we are independent and we receive no financial reward for the houses built. We like to think of ourselves as an honest and independent broker. We only report on the people who complete our surveys, and we often rely on the help of local people to get the surveys publicised and distributed. And it's a great way of beginning to engage with the local community. So do please get in touch with me, and my contact details are on the slide. My email is giles.meredith@cdahearts.org.uk, or you can contact Debbie at North Herts or Helen George at East Herts, who I believe is on the call this afternoon. The issues are much more complicated than can be dealt with in a 5-minute slot, but we can show you our questionnaires and our survey reports and explain how development of affordable housing might be achievable in your community. And I'm very happy to come along to parish council meetings if required. We work right across Hertfordshire, so do please get in touch. And just to close, I'd say that we all know that the cost of living crisis is ever deepening, and we really need to, more than ever, give the poorest in our society a leg up where we can. And this is one way that we can all do something positive to help achieve that. So that's me. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Giles. And yes, rural housing enablers are an essential part of the process of delivering affordable housing in villages, not just because of their independent housing needs assessment, but also the support and advice they can offer to parish councils and communities. And as I say, they play a very important role. So thank you, Giles. Finally, our last video is perhaps maybe the most important one. It's from an English rural resident from Hampshire who will talk about what it's meant to have an affordable home in her home village.
I feel I was incredibly privileged to gain this English rural home, as previously my landlord had decided to sell our rented home. With high rural rents and everything, it meant leaving the village, which meant leaving our support network and my family and moving to a whole new way of life, which would have been totally alien to not only myself, but at that time my 7-year-old daughter. The whole process with English Rural, from application to interview to signing the contract, was simple. It was self-explanatory, and I found the staff friendly and helpful. When we finally moved in, it felt like an amazing life opportunity. Immediately I felt this huge sense of relief. We also have stability with English Rural because it means that we have that option of a house for life. Which makes it feel permanent, which in turn makes it feel secure, and it makes it feel like a home. In this village, there's a huge sense of community. Being in this village means that I've been able to maintain that security for my daughter and myself. It also means that I have my mum and dad a stone's throw away, which is amazing. In terms of a village, it's a very friendly, tight-knit community. We have the village pub, we have a local shop, which is almost at the heart of the community. We have the post van, we've got buses, the village centre, where there's a whole host of activities. With the pandemic, I haven't once felt insecure, knowing that if I had financial troubles, English Rural would help, that I'm not going to lose my home, and that I can actually afford the rents that are in place due to them being a lot cheaper than private rents. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I feel very privileged and I feel incredibly blessed, and I am very grateful to English Rural. So yeah, very happy. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great story. We have lots more like that. I'd now like to introduce Martin Collett, English Rural's Chief Executive, who's going to sum up today's conversations and coordinate the question and answer session. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Ali. So we've got about sort of 10-15 minutes for sort of Q&A. There are a few questions come through, but please keep them coming, because I'll try and get through as many as we can. We've got an expert panel here, so make the most of it and get some difficult questions for them to answer. In terms of summing up, so you've heard from Allison about the role of the housing association. You've had a landowner's perspective from Henry. We've heard from Debbie about the role the local authority can play in supporting parish councils. You've heard about the critical role that Giles plays as the rural housing enabler as well. You've heard from a parish council who have gone through the process and delivered some affordable homes. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, you've heard from a resident that's benefited from an affordable home. And for us here at English Rural, you know, the residents are core. Communities are about people, and our homes are about people, because the people make those communities as well. When I'm sort of summing up things like this, I quite often sort of tell my own story about a rural community, and the rural community that I grew up in about 40 years ago now. And it's a rural community my parents still live in, so I go back to visit them there. And what I notice when I go back there now is that the shop is closed, and the pub is closed, and the post office is closed, and the school is closed, and the 6 farms are now sort of 3 farms, with 3 of them being converted into market housing. There's irregular bus services, and the population is much older as well. And the one thing about that village is they have not provided any affordable homes, and the homes that they did have mostly have been sold through the right to buy. And it's a story that we see up and down the country where we work, where actually no more housing has been provided for generations, and the communities have suffered as a result of that. And here at English Rural, we know that a development of affordable rural homes can make the difference for that community. Otherwise, we wouldn't do what we do. But to help us understand that and evidence that, we commissioned Pragmatics to undertake some research for us back in 2020. And what I will ask is, when the information sort of follows to delegates after this event, I'll ask that a link is put in to that research, because it's on our website, and there's some sort of fascinating statistics in there, and I don't have time to go through them all now, but it does quite neatly bring together everything that you have heard today. Because what Pragmatics found was that, you know, firstly, providing some affordable homes made societal sense. It helps young families to stay in the village who would otherwise be unable to afford to do so, and that helps to maintain those local family and support networks that are so critical, and proved so critical during COVID and the pandemic as well. And it gives somewhere for people to live where they're working close by in the village as well. It has an economic impact for the village, and we quite often say that what we do in a village, if we go and build some houses, it's the biggest investment that community would have seen perhaps for a generation. So the money we are spending on building the homes and then ongoing in maintaining them helps to boost the local economy, creating local jobs and, you know, supporting local tradespeople as well. But importantly, what it also does is provide somewhere for the local workforce to live, and that local workforce can then go and help support the businesses in and around that community as well. It also has a positive impact on the public purse, and I don't think this should be underestimated either. And we were talking about sort of an older generation being seen in villages, quite often living in unsuitable homes for their needs with nowhere else to move to as well. And what we will often do is try and sort of think about that problem and a solution for that at the same time as building some affordable homes, and providing the right homes that are well designed does help save the NHS lots of money, but also delivering some genuinely affordable homes also helps to save welfare costs as well. But as you have heard, it does start with the local community. It does start with the parish council, and the parish council have to take that initiative to think, OK, we can see this problem in our own village, and we know the solution is to provide some affordable homes. What are we going to do about that? But you don't have to do it alone. There are experts out there, likes of English Rural. There are others like us. There's Giles, there's Debbie. We're all here to hold your hand and help you along your journey. But it does start with you. I'm going to pick up some questions now because I can see there are some more coming through. So what I will probably do is just ask a question and direct it to one of the panel members and then open it up to the rest, if that's OK. So we've got an anonymous question here, which is around the sites that come forward for affordable housing. And the question is, Ali, I'm going to direct this one to you. Is an affordable build viable if land has to be acquired at market value, i.e. if the only available land does not have development potential? Do you want to pick that up, Ali?
I think it's important that we appreciate why a rural exception site is best for local needs housing. A rural exception site is land that wouldn't normally be given permission for housing, so it's not an allocated site in the local plan. Therefore, firstly, its value is fixed, it's not open market value. But more importantly, it's the rural exception site policy that ensures that the homes can only be occupied by local people and that they can never be sold on the open market, so that the homes that are built are remaining there in perpetuity for future generations. So to try and build, you wouldn't be able to meet that criteria on an open market site. Firstly, you wouldn't be able to restrict to local people. I mean, the local authority might agree to an initial local lettings plan with some of the homes given priority, but majority of them would be allocated to people from the housing register. So I think the rural exception site route is the best proven trusted way to move forward.
Thank you, Alison. Debbie or Giles, did you want to pick up on that at all, or are you quite happy with Alison's answer on that? Looks like
I'll just add in there, obviously on some rural sites where we have had market housing that are maybe allocated in the plan, our local plan anyway, we would still look to have like a local connection criteria in the Section 106 agreement, especially for initial or first lets, so that obviously if a market site came up in a rural parish, we would still look to meet any identified needs we knew by offering, as I say, first dibs to anyone with a local connection to the parish.
Thank you very much. Giles, there's a question here I want to put to you first, because I think you'll have some direct experience of this. And the question is from Karen, and it says, what is the best way to deal with objectors to any plan to build affordable homes in the village? I'm sure you've come across that before. What would your advice be, Giles?
It's a good question. I think you probably have to accept that there will always be objectors. And that the best way of dealing with them is, I think, as Henry in the landowner video touched on, is to communicate to actively and ideally via the parish council. But I think you have to remember that affordable schemes, although they can be built on rural land, on greenbelt land, they still have to respect the setting that they're in. They still have to fit in with the community. They still have to be at the right scale, and they still have to get through planning. And I think unless they're ticking those boxes, then they're not going to succeed anyway. And I think we've seen some examples of really positive, progressive architecture and design, which I think means that the number of objectors is probably fewer than you might imagine they would be.
Thank you, Giles. I'm going to come to Alison perhaps in a minute as well to share a little story about my experience with objectors before I do. And I used to attend lots of information events where there were always objectors. And I remember one of them saying to me once, "You've got an answer for everything, Martin." And my response was, "Ask an original question," and I might not. They have asked all of the questions that you will be asked before, and there are answers to all of their questions. And quite often it's around stigma as well, what the houses will look like and who is going to live in them. And I think if you come with the knowledge about what the concerns might be, you can allay those quite quickly. But also in my experience, don't expect to please everybody, because some people just simply won't want it. And there's nothing really you can say to those individuals, but they are in a minority, always in a minority. Ali, do you want to add anything to that?
Only that the consultation that we undertake is key in persuading or informing those who have concerns or objections about what the project is about. And I think we're running consultations online now, which are incredibly successful because they run for 3 weeks. It's a dedicated website to that parish. It's got all the information, the proposals, why we're doing it, who's supporting it. It allows people to register an interest. It allows people to make comments, to influence the design if they wish to. And, it does try to dispel a lot of those myths about affordable housing. So, as Martin said, you're never going to win everybody round, but what you're doing is important. And the majority, and particularly when the development is built and they can see that every single property is occupied by someone with a connection to that village. I mean, people will grudgingly say afterwards, well, yeah, it is actually really good. And it is something here in the future for the community.
Good. I think I've got time for 2 more questions. I think there's one for you, Ali, and then there's one for you, Debbie. The one, Ali, for you is from Neil, and he's referencing Henry's video, and he said, to make the scheme with Henry work, what sort of discount to the market price did we need to offer on the land? But just before you answer that, I'm just going to take issue with something that Henry said. There was no discount on the land at all, because the land didn't have a market value, because it wasn't an allocated site. We paid above the market value for the land, a multiple of agricultural value. I know Henry would see it very differently to me, but we didn't offer a discount. Alison, do you want to pick that up?
Yes. I mean, and I think the very fact that Henry waited until now to sell his land, because when rural exception sites policy first came in, I think housing associations were paying something like 2,000 or 3,000 per acre. I mean, the sort of average rural exception site value per plot is 10,000 per plot. So the site that Henry we developed there is 6 affordable homes. Now that isn't particularly attractive to a lot of landowners now. So we do look at other ways that we might be able to cross-subsidise the affordable homes and to tempt the landowner into paying, to us being able to give him a little bit more. And so the National Planning Policy Framework does permit 1 or 2 open market properties. And on that particular village, the Parish Council were really keen to see some bungalows that would enable local people to downsize to a more suitable property. And so by including 2 open market bungalows, we were able to offer a little bit more than the 10,000 a plot to the landowner. And more importantly, those 2 bungalows are now under offer to local people who've lived in the village for years and are moving to something smaller and more suitable to meet their current needs. It is a matter of looking at each site and seeing what we can work with landowners in.
And final question to you, Debbie. As a parish councillor, how do I make it happen? Who do I need to talk to?
They can get in contact with me or Giles, as he said. I know Giles mentioned that he's willing to attend parish council meetings. I've attended parish council meetings myself with Giles and his predecessor. But if they're interested in having a survey or just finding out some more information, they can either email me. My email address is debbie.eland@north-herts.gov.uk. So they can contact me or Giles, and we can have a chat and see what how to progress it.
Brilliant, thank you, Debbie. And what we'll do for everybody, we'll put all of the contact details for today's speakers in the email that gets circulated afterwards. So you can have Debbie's and Giles and Ali's contact details to make contact with them to follow up. We'll also add in the Parish Council guide Alison was talking about. I'm also going to use my discretion and add some further things in the email. There's a bit of jargon that came through earlier, and if you live and breathe social housing, you don't recognise it, but we use words like cascade and staircasing and 106. We'll also just put a little note to explain actually what that meant for the delegates as well. That's it. We sort of run out of time. I want to sort of thank our speakers for their time today, for what's been a really interesting sort of session. Particular thank you to Dave for doing all of the tech and sorting us all out. I think it would be fair to say none of us speakers are particularly techie. So Dave, thank you very much for your patience and perseverance with us. And thank you for all of the attendees as well for coming, for giving your time to hear what we had to say. I've looked at the delegates list. There's some great names on there and some great opportunities. So do think about what we've said. Do make contact and let's make a difference in your community as well. Thank you very much, everybody.